These are the journeys of the children of Israel when they went out of the land of Egypt by their armies, under the hand of Moses and Aaron. Moses wrote the starting points of their journeys by the commandment of Yahweh. These are their journeys according to their starting points. They traveled from Ramses in the first month on the 15th day of the first month. On the next day after the Passover, the children of Israel went out with a high hand in the sight of all the Egyptians, while the Egyptians were burying all their firstborn whom Yahweh had struck among them. Yahweh also executed judgments on their gods. The children of Israel traveled from Ramses and encamped in Succoth. They traveled from Succoth and encamped in Etham, which is in the edge of the wilderness. They traveled from Etham and turned back to Pihahiroth, which is before Baal-zephon, and they encamped before Migdol. They traveled from before Hahiroth and crossed through the middle of the sea into the wilderness. They went 3 days' journey in the wilderness of Etham and encamped in Marah. They traveled from Marah and came to Elim. In Elim there were 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees, and they encamped there. They traveled from Elim and encamped by the Red Sea. They traveled from the Red Sea and encamped in the wilderness of Sin. They traveled from the wilderness of Sin and encamped in Dophkah. They traveled from Dophkah and encamped in Alush. They traveled from Alush and encamped in Rephidim, where there was no water for the people to drink. They traveled from Rephidim and encamped in the wilderness of Sinai. They traveled from the wilderness of Sinai and encamped in Kibroth Hattaavah. They traveled from Kibroth Hattaavah and encamped in Hazeroth. They traveled from Hazeroth and encamped in Rithmah. They traveled from Rithmah and encamped in Rimmon Perez. They traveled from Rimmon Perez and encamped in Libnah. They traveled from Libnah and encamped in Rissah. They traveled from Rissah and encamped in Kehelathah. They traveled from Kehelathah and encamped in Mount Sephir. They traveled from Mount Sephir and encamped in Haradah. They traveled from Haradah and encamped in Makheloth. They traveled from Makheloth and encamped in Tahath. They traveled from Tahath and encamped in Terah. They traveled from Terah and encamped in Mithkah.